respectable, somewhat worldly manners. A month since, the physicians had named 4 weeks as the outside period during which breath could be supported within the body of the dying man. At the end of the month, the physicians wondered and named another fortnight. The old man lived on wine alone, but at the end of the fortnight he still lived, and the tidings of the fall of the ministry became more frequent. Sir Lambda Mew and Sir Omicron Pie, the 2 great London doctors, now came down for the 5th time and declared, shaking their learned heads, that another week of life was impossible. And as they sat down to lunch in the episcopal dining room, whispered to the Archdeacon their own private knowledge that the ministry must fall within 5 days. The son returned to his father's room and, after administering with his own hands the sustaining modicum of Madeira, sat down by the bedside to calculate his chances. The ministry were to be out within 5 days. His father was to be dead within... No, he rejected that view of the subject. The ministry were to be out, and the diocese might probably be vacant at the same period. There was much doubt as to the names of the men who were to succeed to power, and a week must elapse before a cabinet was formed. Would not vacancies be filled by the outgoing men during this week? Dr. Grantly had a kind of idea that such would be the case, but he did not know, and then he wondered at his own ignorance on such a question. He tried to keep his mind away from the subject, but he could not. The race was so very close, and the stakes were so very high. He then looked at the dying man's impassive, placid face. There was no sign there of death or disease. It was something thinner than of yore, somewhat greyer, and the deep lines of age more marked. But, as far as he could judge, life might yet hang there for weeks to come. Sir Lambda Mew and Sir Omicron Pie had thrice been wrong, and might yet be wrong thrice again. The old bishop slept during 20 of the 24 hours, but during the short periods of his waking moments, he knew both his son and his dear old friend Mr. Harding, the Archdeacon's father-in-law, and would thank them tenderly for their care and love. Now he lay sleeping like a baby, resting easily on his back, his mouth just open, and his few grey hairs straggling from beneath his cap. His breath was perfectly noiseless, and his thin, wan hand, which lay above the coverlid, never moved. Nothing could be easier than the old man's passage from this world to the next. But by no means easy were the emotions of him who sat there watching. He knew it must be now or never. He was already over 50, and there was little chance that his friends who were now leaving office would soon return to it. No probable British Prime Minister, but he who was now in, he who was so soon to be out, would think of making a bishop of Dr. Grantly. Thus he thought long and sadly, in deep silence, and then gazed at that still living face, and then at last dared to ask himself whether he really longed for his father's death. The effort was a salutary one, and the question was answered in a moment. The proud, wishful, worldly man sank on his knees by the bedside, and, taking the bishop's hand within his own, prayed eagerly that his sins might be forgiven him. His face was still buried in the clothes when the door of the bedroom opened noiselessly, and Mr. Harding entered with a velvet step. Mr. Harding's attendance at that bedside had been nearly as constant as that of the Archdeacon, and his ingress and egress was as much a matter of course as that of his son-in-law. He was standing close beside the Archdeacon before he was perceived, and would also have knelt in prayer had he not feared that his doing so might have caused some sudden start and have disturbed the dying.